Hello and welcome to lesson 76 of the Learning Guitar series. In this particular lesson, we're going to tackle two different topics. First, we're going to recap the melodic minor modes that we've done in the last 7 lessons. And then we're going to add an interesting piece of theory that, on a practical level, allows us to use 5 of those modes over a dominant 7 chord. In say, a 5-to-1 type of contest, but even over a static dominant chord. So first of all, let's have a look at the PDFs that comes with the lesson, which are 2. And the first one is literally the recap. So what you have here is just a few tables. Here is the recap of all the 7 modes and the intervals for each of those modes. And here is the vertical structure that, as you should know by now, is just the arpeggios. So it's a different spelling of the same thing. Here are the chords, so the 3 sides of the same coin for each individual modes. We know is melodic minor is minor major 7 as a chord, Dorian flat 2 is a minor 7, etc. And here is the harmonization of, say, the key of G in this case, of those chords. And they sound like this. If we're harmonizing melodic minor scale, we have a G minor major 7, and we have A minor 7, G flat 7, B flat 7 sharp 5, C7, D7, E half diminished, F sharp half diminished, back to G minor major 7. This is the equivalent of when we did the major modes and we looked at the harmonization of major scales. So say in the key of C, we had C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G7, A minor half diminished. So it was simply like... And now we're simply doing the same thing. In this case, we're applying it to the melodic minor modes. In this case, we did it in the key of G. So we had the G minor major 7, A minor, B flat major 7 sharp 5, C7, D7, E half diminished, and F sharp half diminished. So following, you will have literally charts with the 5 shapes of melodic minor, the scale, and the arpeggio, and the chord is always highlighted in blue. And for each individual mode, so here is Dorian flat 2, Lydian sharp 5, Lydian flat 7, Lydian flat 6, Locrian natural 2, and finally the super Locrian mode. In terms of practicing each individual mode, just to get some ear training with it, of course you can use the backing tracks that are made available to the Patron supporters. And also, you can even just loop a chord, the right chord for the specific mode, as I highlighted in the recap. So, for example, like if I want to practice the melodic minor scale, so the first mode on melodic minor, I can just loop a minor major 7 chord and then apply, the relative scale and arpeggios to it. So if I was to practice, say, B flat minor major 7, I can simply loop this chord and I can practice the scale literally as a practice. And of course in 5 shapes, I can practice the arpeggio. And after a while, you might want to practice it, or you might want to play, you want to do it in a musical manner. And of course, you could do the same with each individual mode, associating the correct chord to it. I'll just give you another example so you see where I'm going with this. Let's take Dorian flat 2. So Dorian flat 2 applies to a minor chord. So in this case, maybe let's loop, A minor. And in this case, we can use the Dorian flat 2. And again, we can practice it literally as a scale. And all the other cages, obviously. The arpeggio would be just a minor 7. And then, we can just try and make music. Now let's move on to the second topic of this lesson, because it's it's very, very interesting and opens the door to a lot of sounds and possibility that we have over dominant 7 chords. Let's have a look at the PDF first. So here we have melodic minor over dominant 7 chords. Now that we have looked at all the melodic minor modes, let's discuss both theoretically and practically how it is possible to use them over dominant 7 chords to obtain all sorts of effects in terms of embellishments and alterations. As we know by now, when we discuss the chord scale arpeggio association for dominant chords, our point of reference is the Mixolydian scale derived from the major modes. The intervals of a Mixolydian scales are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. And as you can see, 1, 3, 5, flat 7 basically spells the dominant 7, while 9, 11, and 13 are the extensions or the upper structure of that mode. In this case, we're going to see why, theoretically speaking, we can use various melodic minor modes instead of Mixolydian, eventually what chords we generate in the process, and finally, how we can remember this process easily and make it practical. Over a dominant 7 chord, we can use the following melodic minor modes: Dorian flat 2, Lydian dominant, Mixolydian flat 6, Locrian natural 2, and Super Locrian. Now, before we move further, let's clarify straight away why we can use those 5 modes. And actually, not just those. The fact that those modes contain, as an interval, a flat 7. So every time a scale contains a flat 7, it can be applied to a dominant 7 chord. As I said, the reference is Mixolydian, and Mixolydian only contains the dominant chord, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, plus the embellishments, upper structure, 9, 11, and 13. And it applies beautifully to, pop music. So you have G7, you're using G Mixolydian, it sounds great. The moment we start adding alterations and alterations are basically the notes that don't belong to Mixolydian, so flat 9, sharp 9, flat 5, sharp 5, and the major 7. Now we have other sounds, other forms of tension that we can apply to dominant 7 chord. That this is typical, the use of this, approach to alterations is typical of styles like jazz, fusion, even R&B. I mean, these are not so uncommon as sounds. Of course, you rarely hear them when it comes to pop, but nevertheless, knowing it and knowing them and how to use them kind of makes you more of a versatile player who can approach different styles of music and, not just pop. So as I said, the fact that there is a flat 7 in there allows us to use it. When I say that, automatically it means that even if I look at the major modes, so where you add the Dorian, for example, or Phrygian, or Aeolian, or Locrian, beside Mixolydian, these are all scales that, when applied correctly, they apply, say, Dorian applies to a minor chord, and Phrygian applies to a minor chord, etc. But I can superimpose them over a dominant 7 chord because all these scales have a flat 7 as an interval in the scale. So I can use Dorian over G7, so G Dorian instead of G Mixolydian over G7, and I'm getting some alterations. In the case I will get a sharp 9. The same thing is happening here. We're using 5 melodic minor modes, but not on the correct chord of the harmonization, but literally over a dominant chord. Let's go back to the PDF. For example, in a progression like G7 to C major 7, we could use over G7, G Dorian flat 2, G Lydian dominant, G Mixolydian flat 6, G Locrian natural 2, and G Super Locrian. As we will see in the following pages, an even easier way to remember and put into practice this piece of theory is to think just in terms of melodic minor scale / minor major 7 arpeggio as at a specific intervallic distance from the dominant chord we are targeting. In other words, for G7, we could simply think melodic minor a semitone up from G, A flat melodic minor, and that would be the equivalent of using G superlochan. Melodic minor a tone down from G, that's F melodic minor. This is the equivalent of using G Dorian flat 2. A melodic minor a fourth up from G, so C melodic minor, and this is the equivalent of using G mixolydian flat 6. A melodic minor a fifth up from G, so D melodic minor, and this is the equivalent of using G leading dominant. A melodic minor a flat 3 up from G, so B flat melodic minor, and this is the equivalent of using G Locrian natural 2. So in other words, we can think of 5 different modes over a dominant 7 chords, or a single mode. In this case, we're using melodic minor, and melodic minor the scale, so the first degree. Sometimes it's a bit confusing the fact that we call the melodic minor modes, and now we're talking about 7 different scales, like melodic minor, Dorian flat 2, etc., as opposed to melodic minor the scale, so the first degree of the melodic minor modes, which is also called melodic minor, obviously. So in this case, we're taking the first degree melodic minor and displace it, okay? That way we kind of can, at least on a brain level, it simplifies things a little bit. So, in other words, what we were discussing on the PDF is, let's say that I have an A7 chord. I can use the 5 different melodic minor modes by playing melodic minor scale a semitone up from the dominant 7 chord. So from A7 it would be B flat melodic minor, a tone down would be G melodic minor, a fourth up would be D melodic minor, a fifth up would be E melodic minor, and a flat 3 up would be C melodic minor. I'm going to demonstrate it to you sonically in a second, and then we're going to go back to the PDF, and I'm going to show you also, like, from a theoretical point of view, what is it that is happening chords-wise, etc. But first and foremost, the idea of practicing it applied to a 5-to-1 progression, and a 5-to-1 progression, so if chord number 5 is A, in this case, chord number 1 would be D major 7. It's because what we want to practice really, instead of practicing it in isolation, so instead of practicing B melodic minor, B flat melodic minor, a semitone up from A in a static manner, so just looping A7 and that's it. It doesn't resolve because A7 obviously is a tension and it wants to resolve somewhere. So in order to train our ears better, a 5-to-1 loop is a much better solution. And so individually we can go from whatever we want to try and apply over A7 to Ionian, so D Ionian, because that would be the resolution. So we have to change 2 scales, basically. Let me loop A7 to C to D major 7, and then I'll demonstrate it to you. So if I was to play pop, this would be basically A7 mixolydian going into D Ionian, which are technically the same notes, right? And it's going to sound, obviously it's going to sound nice and it's going to sound polite. I think that would be a good word for it. And, nothing particularly, wrong about it. But now let's start applying this new piece of theory where we're using a melodic minor scale, a minor major 7 arpeggio. I have A7, I'm going to go a semitone up from it, so it's B flat melodic minor, resolving into D Ionian. And that was like literally practicing the scale. In a musical manner, you have this kind of sound. this is the equivalent of using basically a superrocket, which is a sound very common in jazz playing. It's not an easy sound. You have 4 alterations going on compared to Mixolydian. Let's have a look at what it sounds instead. From A7, we'll go a tone down. That's the equivalent of playing Dorian flat 2. But as I said, I'm just going to think melodic minor, tone down from the dominant 7. So we're going to go G melodic minor and then resolving into D Ionian. Now, the third possibility we have is to go a 4th up from the dominant 7 chord and play melodic minor. In this case, A7, a 4th up, will be D. So now I have D melodic minor and D minor major 7 arpeggio, resolving into D Ionian. So in a way, it's like going from D minor to D major. Let's see what that sounds like. And that was the equivalent, basically, of playing Mixolydian flat 6. The 4th possibility is to go a 5th up from the dominant 7 chord. So in the case of A, the 5th of A is E. So E melodic minor or E minor major 7 arpeggios instead of A7 in terms of scales, instead of A Mixolydian, and resolving again into D Ionian. And that's the equivalent, basically, of using a Lydian dominant. But E melodic minor is the same kind of notes. The 5th possibilities we have is to go a flat 3 up from the dominant 7 chord. So in the case of A7, we're using C melodic minor and C minor major 7 arpeggios instead of A Mixolydian, and then resolving into D Ionian, so D major 7. I reckon, from my perspective, this is the hardest one for me to improvise with and create melodies with. But nevertheless, maybe you'll be luckier. It's still a very interesting sound, very alterated. Let's see. can see, these are different sounds compared to Mixolydian. And if we look at the PDF in the following pages, first you have a recap of what we just discussed. And then you have each individual mode examined and discussed. So, for example, over G7, if I go a semitone up, and the G is represented by this root note here, and here is the minor major 7 arpeggio, a semitone up from G in this case, so A flat melodic minor, and also a flat melodic minor as in scale. And from a G perspective, what the A flat melodic minor is bringing to the game in terms of alterations is a flat 9, a sharp 9, a flat 5, a sharp 5. And the flat 7, as you can see, is in common, and the third is also in common with Mixolydian. But if you look at what I've written here on the side, it's going to explain you even further what is it that you're creating, in particular in terms of underlining chords. So these are chords that you can go strat because you're applying this. So let's take this as an example. And as you can see here, you have for a tone down, so you have melodic minor, you have it a fourth up, a fifth up, and then finally a flat 3 up. So when you're practicing the 5-to-1 in terms of chords, you don't necessarily have to play, straight, say, G7 to C major 7. Now, the fact that we're thinking melodic minor or semitone up allows us to use other dominant 7 chords with other alterations. So even in practicing chords, I can literally go, and then the following scale. I can go, say, G7 sharp 5 to C major 7. Or G7 sharp 5 flat 9 to C major 9, right? And in doing so, by associating these altered chords in the 5-to-1 progression, now I get even closer to an application of the melodic minor, semitone up, etc., or tone down. I'll give you an example. So in this case, I'm going to loop G7 sharp 5 or flat 9 to a C major, and then apply melodic minor semitone up over G7. And now I can practice my melodic minor semitone up. In this case, it would be A flat melodic minor. And as you can see on the PDF, for each melodic minor you decide to go, so if it's a semitone up or a tone down, etc., on the right hand side it is telling you what kind of chords you're also creating beside what kind of alterations you're adding when you're adding them, or whatever it can be in common with Mixolydian. I hope this makes sense, but of course, like if you have a question, feel free to message me. I think this is going to be the last lesson, at least for now, on melodic minors, and we're going to move on to a different topic from the next lesson. In the meanwhile, thank you for your support. It's very much appreciated, and enjoy practicing, enjoy playing, and I'll see you next time. Bye.